We're going to change over here, and we're going to be talking with my guest who wrote this book right here, and it's called GangsterLand. This is David, it's always a pleasure to have you on the show. I know you're on C-SPAN, you're everywhere. His books are amazing, and usually, you know, you're hearing about baseball. And that was your first writer. You kind of did the baseball.
Yeah, the first books were
on baseball. You're a historian on baseball.
Right, yeah.
And then you've done all not all the presidents, but you've done a lot of them.
Early 20th century, basically.
Yeah.
The elections, yes.
The elections and Delano Roosevelt.
Eleanor keeps showing up.
Yeah, he just kind of, those Roosevelts, you know how they are.
Yeah, well, yeah. I can't get away from them, no.
You can't. But anyway, this book called GangsterLand, I hope I got my mic right. GangsterLand, I found it so interesting. For the first, 13 pages, you list people and who they are. So I'm looking down the list, and I'm, so Lucky Luciano, and many of those are in there. But when I'm looking and I see George Raft,
yes,
and I'm seeing Jimmy Durante, and of course Baby Snooks, so tell us what did it take to make the list of 13 and then to go into to delve into each of them throughout the book to explain.
Well, the cast of characters is something I've been doing for a
do
while
that all the
now.
Time, yeah.
And I'm kind of surprised that more authors don't.
I wish they would. Dr. Zhivago, please.
One of the problems, I think, of becoming an expert on something and an author is you assume everybody knows this stuff. And they don't. They may not even remember who George Raft is. Or you said Baby Snooks, that's Fanny Brice.
Yeah, Fanny Brice.
Right? So we compile that, and if they make the show, if they make the pages, more than once, or a significant amount of times, you go into their little bio. And it's also an excuse to put in their birth dates and death dates.
And their nicknames.
And their nicknames. Their nicknames and their full names and their real names.
Yeah.
Because a lot of these people have, George Raft was like George Raft or some Germanic sounding thing. And without being obtrusive or judgmental about, J. Danforth Quayle or something, it's like, this is just what it was. So you try to play it, I try to play it straight.
How did you find I look at this and I'm going, where on earth did he find all of these names? I mean, Edna Wheaton, George White, who are these people? It's like...
A lot of them are, Edna Wheaton would be a showgirl, and there are a lot of showgirls. You take a look at the movies from the pre-code movies.
Oh my goodness.
On TCM.
TCM, I always watch those.
Right. And what are the plots about? It's about Broadway, it's about showgirls, you often see a lot of movies about jewel robberies. And when I did a book earlier about Arnold Rothstein, and this is sort of,
you've done a lot on him,
this is like a spin-off of that book. And literally, because I had done a tour earlier, a physical tour of Broadway years ago, and then I was asked maybe a couple years ago to do a radio show on this, to do an interview show, and I said, well, I've still got all my notes. And by the way, I was stiffed on payment for that tour because you got to watch you've got to.
I don't have to pay you?
No, but I mean, that's how crooked Times Square can be.
Yeah.
Hold on to your wallet.
Yeah.
But so we still had the notes, and I thought, well, maybe I can just do a little pamphlet on this subject. And the results is it got carried away. And it got carried away. You ask how I could find this stuff is, well, you start with that base. And then so many of the newspapers are now online.
Online, yeah.
Okay? And unlike today's newspapers, which don't give you as many details as they used to, it's like, okay, so who killed that guy last night? Okay, in Schenectady. What was the name? Where did they live? What was the precise address? The newspapers then would tell you this stuff. which is essential for doing a walking tour sort of book, they'd not only tell you the address, they might tell you the apartment number. So I would have
Oh, so
all
you've
those.
got all that
I would have
the
all those
detail.
details. Sure.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not a narrated book. In other words, you've set it up so that they're numbered.
Because it's a walking tour.
It's a tour.
It's not chronological. It's geographic. So I start roughly at Times Square and head up.
I know you do the streets. It's like, oh my goodness, it's like you're there when you're reading this.
Yeah.
And when you did Jimmy Durante, I'm going, Jimmy Durante, why is he in here? And then I find
Lovable
out
Jimmy Durante.
He's got a restaurant and a gambling thing in the basement.
It's heavily speakeasy oriented. There was some guy doing an interview recently I saw on TV, and he says, "Oh, the police would never raid these places. They raided them all the time, actually. I mean, in terms of percentage of how many there were, not overwhelmingly, but these places were getting raided all the time, and the West 50s in particular were loaded with speakeasies. And then you'd raid the place, they'd shut it down, and then they'd open it up again, and they'd be bang, 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 one in a row. And then
they start over again.
And in many cases, bang, 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 because people would be shot in them or in front of them. Yes.
So there was violence.
Absolute violence. I mean, you see, there's connections in the book to this area.
Yeah.
Bang, 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 at the one of the clubs named was the Hotsy Totsy Club, which sounds like it was made up for a pre-code movie, right? But there really was such a place.
Hotsy Totsy.
And it was run by Legs Diamond, who was, of course, killed in Albany in the building still owned, I guess it hasn't been sold, by Bill Kennedy.
Okay.
And he was operating also in the Catskills, and the connections between the book to Saratoga Springs.
That's the one thing that amazed me is how much Saratoga plays into this.
Yeah, because in August it was the August
The
place
August
to be,
yeah.
even then. So Arnold Rothstein, the key player in the book here in the chronology or the lay of the land, was married in Saratoga Springs. He made some of his early fortunes there. He had a racing stable. One of the fellows who had a gambling house, who was sort of like Arnold Rothstein's hero. I say even villains have heroes. And there was a guy named Richard Canfield, and he had a place.
The Canfield Casino.
The Canfield Casino.
And it's still named that.
And yes, and you can go see that and see what that was like. And you can also.
Was that a casino?
It was a casino.
That's what I thought, and they still use that name.
Yeah, sure. And Arnold Rothstein, the house where he was married, it's still there. It was the house of the Justice of the Peace on Washington Street.
Well, now I think the closest that we get to this in musical comedy is Fanny.
No, Guys and Dolls. Guys and Dolls.
Dolly. Oh, Guys and Dolls.
Guys and Dolls.
Damon Runyon.
Damon Runyon.
And he's mentioned in
He's
here,
in there all the time too.
I
because
love Damon Runyon.
Yes.
I love his short stories. A lot of people don't know he has a lot of short stories that he's written, and they're the same lingo that he uses.
Yep.
And apparently that's the lingo they did use.
I think so. There is some dialogue, not dialogue in there, but a substantial quote from the cashier at Lindy's restaurant. And he's talking just like a Damon Runyon character.
Yeah.
Lindy's, of course, becomes
the cheesecake
becomes Mindy's in Guys and Dolls.
Yeah, right.
And you can visit the hotel where Arnold Rothstein was shot. You also get multiple bad
I was
things.
thinking Funny Girl. That was the one I was
Funny
thinking.
Girl.
Funny Girl.
Well, Funny Girl because it's Fanny Bryce.
Yeah.
Why is Fanny Bryce in the book about gangsters? Because one of her husbands, her second husband, I think her first husband was a barber from Albany. Okay.
I did not know that. Maybe it's in here, and
it might be in there, or it's just in here.
It's in here.
It's just in here, and I'm stuck with it. And so her second husband was Nicky Arnstein, who was a henchman of Arnold Rothstein and was convicted at one point of stealing millions of dollars in Liberty bonds, the war bonds from World War I. And she also, then she goes on to marry, what's his name, Rose.
Billy Rose?
Billy
No.
Rose.
Yeah, Billy.
Billy Rose, who is the another speakeasy operator, and he is muscled into by a henchman of Arnold Rothstein, and is said, we want a share of this. We'll give you $1,000, which even then,
Well, it was big money.
Big money for the average guy on the
Yeah.
street, but
Yeah.
not if you're in that business. Not if you're raking in so much money. And so they muscle in for a share of that as a blind for actually Arnold Rothstein, who was then going to pay off the police and the judges and all that.
Yeah, I mean, it was all graft. I mean,
It's
you
all
had to
it's all
get-
great. It's
yeah.
all payoff,
Yeah,
sure.
payoff.
And Rothstein is the connective tissue between so much of this, of gangsters
There's a thread, yeah.
and Broadway and labor racketeering and Wall Street. Wall Street
too,
Wall
yeah.
Street comes into this
Must have missed
because
that.
yeah. Well, one of the guys, another Saratoga connection. The owner of the New York Giants, then, not the football Giants, but the baseball Giants, was
And you're an expert in baseball,
that's right,
too.
Charles Stoneham. That the deal to buy the Giants was brokered by Arnold Rothstein. Stoneham was a big crook who ran bucket shops.
What's a bucket
A
shop?
bucket shop. I'm glad you asked.
Aren't I glad? See, I might.
And a bucket shop is a broker. You give the broker money to buy a stock, and the stock, and you've been suckered by this broker because he thinks it's a stinker. He thinks it's overvalued. He thinks it's going to go down. But he's never going to buy that stock. He's going to put the money in his pocket.
Because he
And
figures
then-
it's going to go down,
and it's
so you're
gonna
going to
go
lose
down.
anyway.
And that was the racket. Now, occasionally they guess
Oh,
wrong.
yeah, that's not a bad idea.
That's it, right. I think that's why they invented the Securities and
I think
Exchange
they
Commission.
did too.
And these guys would often be connected by Tammany Hall, so you get the political machinations of politics and payoffs, and you get Judge
it was
Crater.
all intertwined,
You get
wasn't it?
Judge Crater, the famous disappearing judge in around 1930 or so, who was appointed to the judgeship, believe it or not, by Franklin D. Roosevelt, because I can't get away from these Roosevelts.
No, you can't get away from
No,
Roosevelt.
no.
So, but yeah, it's to me, this is like so fascinating. If you're interested in anything to do with what happened when, this is amazing. I mean, I'm sure that we have the same thing going on now, but it's probably not as concentrated as it was at this time.
Oh, it was block by block, room by room, yes.
Yeah. And so, what's your next book? Yeah, I gotta ask
To be
you that.
determined, to be determined. Nothing
Okay.
in the works right now.
I never expected you to write this book.
I didn't expect to write it either until I started, and then bang, zoom.
Yeah, and I'm really impressed, and it's a book where you can pick it up and read a little bit here, a little bit there. But I'll tell you, if you get this book, read the cast of characters first. I read every one of those because I felt I needed to know, where are we going with this? And then it made it much easier to pick up any one
Yeah.
of the little stories. And he's got lots of photos in here too. So, and I don't know where he got all these photos, but I'm sure they're all public domain.
They're
right?
public domain. That's the
You
key.
notice I said
That's
that.
the key of what I write about. It's like,
It's
okay,
public domain.
because as I say, talk is cheap, but images are dear.
Yes, they are.
Yes, they are.
David Pietrusza, you'll probably see him on C-SPAN or somewhere else or at a book signing. But if you have an opportunity, please meet this gentleman and learn about his books. He's written, what, 30 or 40 books?
It's going on to 50.
50
Writ-
books,
Written
oh.
or edited, yeah.
Yeah, and I have trouble writing a list of what I have to do today. I don't know. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure to have you on the show. I really respect what you do. Smart man.